Welcome to Front Office Pros. Today, we're going to be talking about our top 24 Dynasty running back rankings with tiers. Joe and I both have some rookies involved in this since our last running back rankings.
Hike!
So, Joe, why don't you start us off? What do you got in tier number 5?
All right, Steve. In tier 5, number 24, I've got Alvin Kamara. 23, Zamir White. 22, Derrick Henry. And at 21, Ramondre Stevenson.
Interesting. So at 24, I've got running back Javonte Williams. 23, running back David Montgomery. 22, running back Trey Benson. And 21, running back DeAndre Swift. It's always interesting when we start looking at the early tiers because more than likely you or I, well, both of us, are going to have players in our tiers that the other doesn't. So I don't have Zamir White. I got to tell you, when you said Zamir White, it did pique my interest because I don't have him in there. The other three I do have in there. I'm assuming you have my 4 in your top 24.
I did not include David Montgomery.
Wow, you didn't include. You love David Montgomery. That's shocking.
Yeah, I do. I just, as far as like his longer term value, does he stick with the Lions? Where does he go? That's kind of concerning for me. And then I'm expecting his usage to go down. I mean, the first half of the year, he had very high usage with Gibbs just kind of trying to figure things out. He's really established himself. So, with Montgomery getting less touches, are they going to still use him in that goal line role? Is he going to still get those touchdowns? We'll see.
It's very interesting because it's a question of whether or not Jahmyr Gibbs is going to continue his ascent. There were so many fantasy managers that were so frustrated by the lack of usage of Jahmyr Gibbs. You saw the Lions take Jahmyr Gibbs so early in the first round. So many had thought, why is this guy taking so long to get the ball? You heard Dan Campbell, it seemed like early on, indicated this guy was going to be this X factor for the team, and he was a non-factor. Once David Montgomery started getting banged up, that was a time when actually Jahmyr Gibbs was able to shine. And then after that, he didn't let his foot off the gas. Now, Montgomery was still involved, but not nearly as much as he was when he was just like the guy. And I don't think we're going to see that again. So you're right in the fact of I could totally see your logic that due to what happened, why should we suspect that anything's going to change? We're basically not going to look in the rearview mirror anymore. Dave Montgomery is Jahmyr Gibbs. He's the Corvette in the garage, that we're dealing with. We're not going to deal with that old reliable anymore.
Right. Yeah. And I'm not saying David Montgomery's not going to have a role. His usage is going to be a lot less than what he experienced. And even once Jahmyr Gibbs did establish himself, the Montgomery utilization just went way down. And that's kind of what I'm expecting a full year of this upcoming season. So it's hard for me to justify the top 24, but I did consider it, though.
Yeah, I just feel like he's probably the best handcuff, too. I know you're not a handcuff guy, but in the event that Gibbs does get injured or whatever else, his relevance is going to be pretty high. We saw it. So I think Montgomery, he's probably got – here's the thing. I mean, and I was going to say this later on in the show here, but I'll say it now. Running backs are so tough because people are going to look at it and be like, well, and Derrick Henry will be a guy I'll talk later, but it'll be like, oh, well, these guys are so old or blah, blah, blah. It's like any of these running backs could have a year or two tops, and then they're not relevant anymore. So there are some that have who have beyond those 2 years, and I've ranked them as such because of that. But it's few and far between that fit that criteria.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I want to say the average shelf life of a running back is like 4 years. A lot of them don't get that. They play out the rookie deal, and even if they go somewhere, it's a lot of times it's a secondary role, and then they kind of just get faded out over time. So. Yeah, running backs, man, it is a tough position. As much as Dynasty, we want to look for the, long-term value. It's like there is no long-term values really at the running back position unless you get, somebody like Christian McCaffrey who's playing later, or, Derrick Henry, who's now 30 and still going to be fantasy relevant.
So what made you put Zamir White in top 24? I didn't honestly. He wasn't even on my radar. But I mean, I would imagine the reason why he is because you think he's got a great opportunity with really only contending for opportunities from Dylan Lobby, a late round draft pick out of New Hampshire, and Alexander Madison.
Exactly. That is my point. I mean, the guys behind me don't scare me. And I think really, Pierce came in and they ran the ball a lot. And I mean, let's face it, Gardner Minshew, Aiden O'Connell is at their quarterback position. I think they're going to want to run the ball. And Zamir White, I mean, late in the season last year, I mean, he played really well. He's still a pretty young running back. You know, played behind Josh Jacobs. Now it's really his job. So I felt like I was inclined to throw him in here.
So one guy I want to talk about here before we move forward, since you've got some of these other guys later on, Javonte Williams. I dropped him quite significantly. I had him a lot higher from before. And I think a part of my reason why, and I could be playing into Sean Payton's.
Yeah, if you're going to say Audric Estime, Steve, I think you're reading into this thing.
Well, here's the thing: Sean Payton talks in riddles. I mean, you listen to his press conference, you even know he is the best that I've ever heard of to talk about absolutely nothing. He just like goes around in circles and circles. But beyond that, though, Javonte, he's a talented running back, and I think that he's had a lot of potential. But let's remember, he's had a ton of injury issues. He's got 1 year left on his deal. Are the Broncos really going to re-sign him? I'm not so sure that they would. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. So that's the case. Then does Javonte Williams get a second contract? I think it could really depend on how he performs this year. But it's even beyond Audric Estime. You've got the undrafted guy last year who came out of nowhere, played really, really well for them. And people were like, who's this guy? Right? You got him that came in. You've got Blake Watson, who's an undrafted guy now that Sean Payton's talking about comparing him to Alvin Kamara. So it's like, you got Julian McLaughlin, who I forgot his name for a second there. So you have Julian McLaughlin. Now you've got an undrafted running back in Blake Watson, and you've got Audric Estime. So it's like, now you've got, and you still have Samaje Perine on the roster. So it's like Sean Payton has all these different running backs in the room. He's talking about how basically he's chopping up the running back position, in bite-sized pieces. And he's basically saying like, well, these running backs are going to have to contend for all these different roles. So is McLaughlin going to get the third down back role and have that with Watson, and then Javonte is going to get first down, and and plus not to mention who Broncos could have Bo Nix as their starting quarterback, could have some rookie, I'd say, growing pains. So I just think at the end of the day, I just worry about Javonte Williams' longevity, and so he took a big tumble for me.
Yeah, I think it's fair to question the future of Javonte Williams, but I'm really expecting a big year for him this year. Second year removed from the injury, we just see with the ACL injuries, and he had more than the ACL. There's a lot of ligament damage and everything else that he did to the knee. So, he came back pretty quickly. But I'm expecting the second year removed away from the injury, he's going to be a lot better. But, it is fair to just talking about, his long term. I don't know whether or not the Broncos bring him back, or, if another team's going to, want to sign him. It could be hinging on what he does this year.
Yeah, and that's the one thing going for him, because we talk about it all the time. When it's a contract year, they're going to ball out so they can cash out. So it's very possible that that's going to happen for him. I'm just concerned because I don't know if he's going to be given the opportunity that he deserves, because I think he's a great running back. I had him a lot higher. He's going to have to get that second contract. I don't think Denver's going to do it, and if Denver doesn't, who will? That to me is concerning.
Yeah, like I said, beyond this year, that is concerning. That's a fair point by you.
Are you enjoying this episode so far? Well, if you are, show your support to our channel by following us on Apple and Spotify under the Salary Cap Show, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Front Office Pros. If you want advice on your trades, head over to the Front Office Pros Twitter and fill out our Front Office Pros Dynasty Trade Inquiry Form, which gives us all the information we need to help advise you on what is the best move for your team. So heading over to Tier 4, who do you got there, Joe?
All right. In tier 4, at number 20, I've got Joe Mixon, 19, DeAndre Swift, 18, Najee Harris, 17, Isaiah Pacheco, and at 16, Josh Jacobs.
Very interesting. All right, at number 20, I've got Alvin Kamara. Number 19, Ramondre Stevenson. Number 18, I know, Joe Mixon. 17, Najee
Oh.
Harris. And 16, Derrick Henry. And for those who are wondering why I made that comment about Joe Mixon, is in the last time we talked about this video, I was saying that Joe Mixon was no longer going to be in the league due to everything that he brings outside the locker room. And Joe incessantly would tell me that that's not the case and that he will be on another team. And what do you know? He goes to the Texans and he gets a contract extension. So talk about a guy who, I was wrong on this one, and I will admit when I'm wrong. We try to prognosticate. We are thinking about who we think is going to be good, who we think is going to be bad. We try to take whether you look at the stats or what coaches have to say or what rookies are brought in. You look at all these different. There's so many different data points and different sound bites that you could take from to make your case as to why this is the case. And sometimes you gotta say you're wrong. I was wrong. I think Joe Mixon. I think he's gonna have a lot of stability. That contract extension. I couldn't believe the Texans gave it to him, but I think it could make it so that he actually has more than 1 year stability over in Houston. And he's been really good on it. I mean, he's been solid. He's been a solid guy over these past 2 years. Now I know that D'Amico Ryans came out and said, "Well, I think that him and Dameon Pierce make a good 1-2 punch." I'm not concerned about Dameon Pierce. I think that ship is long gone from what we saw this past season. So I think you and I are on a similar page here when it comes to Mixon.
Yeah, well, I mean, you talk about a guy I'm not even sure you had in your top 24 last time, too.
I did
Having him
not.
now ranked ahead of me, so that's pretty impressive, Steve.
I know. That was
But
it is quite a shock.
yeah, it shocked me for sure. Yeah, as far as Dameon Pierce goes, I mean, if Dameon Pierce couldn't steal carries away from Devin Singletary last year, what makes you think he's going to steal carries away from Joe Mixon?
He
I
won't.
mean, coaches can say what they want, man. Well, we'll see what happens actually once the regular season actually starts.
Now I wanted to bring up this point. You've talked about this guy before. I'm going to talk about him now. I have Derrick Henry at 16. You had him, far lower than I did. You had him at 22. I really like Henry. You heard recently Todd Monken talk about it's going to be a really good year if Derrick Henry has 300 carries. He is defying the odds when it comes to the running back position. He is a complete. You talk about once in a generation type of running back. I know people don't like that type of terminology, but this guy, he is in a whole different category all of his own. And he went to the perfect landing spot for him where that offense just likes to grind and ground and pound. I think this guy, here's the thing. How long is Henry going to keep playing for? You would think the wheels are going to fall off. He signed a 2-year deal. It's very likely he could stay in Baltimore and he could continue to do what he does. The only thing that really might stop him is possibly if he gets injured, which he started having some durability issues before. I considered ranking him higher than 16. Now I know, your people are out there that probably throwing tomatoes at me saying this is dynasty. You can't have Derrick Henry there. That's crazy talk. Look at the running back market. We just talked about it. You're looking at these guys maybe 1 to 2 years of relevance, and these 1 or 2 years of Derrick Henry could be really good in my view.
Oh yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, he did go to the perfect landing spot. Me putting him at 22, I mean, had no bearing on what this guy's production potential is, especially with the Baltimore Ravens now, strictly just because of age and not sure, like you mentioned, is his health and how he's going to handle everything like that through the full season. I mean, if he gets 300 touches, man, I like that'll be something. But yeah, I could see why you have him at 16. And like you said, I mean, to your standpoint, with all these running backs, who knows if any of these guys have longer than the 1 or 2 years. From that standpoint, your ranking higher of Henry makes sense.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, you and I both did not have DeAndre Swift in our top 24. I'm pretty positive I didn't. I don't think you did either, but now you have him quite higher.
Yeah, I'm not so sure that I did either. But yeah, now I got him at 19.
I'm pretty confident that you didn't. So I mean, I don't disagree with you. I think he went to a great landing spot with the Bears, and I think he will be the guy. Herbert was in the doghouse. People thought he'd get more involved. People were, enamored by Roshan Johnson and his potential. He didn't do anything. So, I mean, I think the opportunity is there for DeAndre Swift, who showed flashes in Philly.
Did show flashes, and you know, we'll see if a lot had to do with just playing behind that great offensive line that Philly had. But, I think Swift, as long as he can, health is a big thing for him. If he can stay healthy, you said it. I'm not scared of the Khalil Herberts and the Roshan Johnson of the world in Chicago, taking touches away from him. And Chicago brought this guy in for a reason, in free agency. And just with the passing attack that they potentially going to have, I mean, that could open up things for him right there because it's going to be hard to put 8 in the box against this team, I feel like.
All right, Joe. So why don't you head on over? Sorry. All right, Joe. So why don't we head on over to tier number 3? Who do you got there?
All right. In tier 3 at 15, I've got Rachaad White, 14, Javonte Williams, 13, Trey Benson, 12, Jonathan Brooks, 11, Kenneth Walker, and at number 10, Kyren Williams.
All right. So at number 15, I've got Kenneth Walker, 14, Achane, 13, James Cook, 12, Jonathan Brooks, 11, Isaiah Pacheco, and 10, running back Kyren Williams. So I think one of the more glaring things I see here is you and I are quite different on running back Trey Benson. I had him at 22. You had him at 13. Not to say that I don't like him. Well, I guess I don't like him nearly as much as you do. So tell me what you're thinking there. I mean, obviously you got running back James Conner there for the initial year, which I mean I don't think you or I are concerned about James Conner. But I do think that for the initial year, it might not allow for him to have a full opportunity. After that, I guess he would have 3 years until his second contract if he's really good. Unless they draft another running back, it could be, he could steal the show the rest of the way. Why did you have him at 13?
Yeah, I just feel like he could take a little bit of a hit his rookie year, but from then on, I mean, I think he went to a pretty decent landing spot with the Arizona Cardinals. And his utilization on the offense, I think, is going to be pretty strong. So, I mean, honestly, one of the main reasons I have Brooks higher is just because I think, he's going to have the immediate impact on the Carolina Panthers that Benson might not. But, I still think Benson has potential to be the top running back in the class.
Well, do you think it's kind of interesting, though, because all we heard this offseason is that this wasn't a great running back class. We saw it even in the NFL draft. I want to say that when Jonathan Brooks was drafted, it was very close. It either was a record or it was like the second or third closest where it took as far as how long it took for a running back to be taken in the NFL draft. Wherever Brooks was slotted, I don't know what pick he was, but I want to say that it was a very long time before running back was called compared to in the common draft era when that happened. So even the NFL would tell you this wasn't a great running back class. So do you think that you and I are we getting caught up with that it's dynasty and it's so, everyone wants to fixate on age? So are we too fixated on that because it's technically not a great running back class and you and I both have Brooks 12 and you have Benson pretty high at 13? Or maybe this running back class isn't as bad as we're making it out to be. Or is it just an eligibility? I use the word eligibility. It's the wrong word, but is it just an opportunity thing? Because that Brooks and Benson basically have the next 3 or 4 years. And so long as there's no competition, these guys are going to get great workload.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of those things. Like even though you would say it's not the best draft class for running backs, it doesn't mean that there wasn't some good talents at the running back position. But then I think, as far as the NFL draft goes, I mean, there was just offensive line was so deep, and it makes sense that you'd want to, put your investments in offensive line over the running back position, or even this was a star-studded wide receiver class, also very deep. So I just think it was kind of the running back class got overshadowed by some of those other positions in the actual NFL draft. But from a dynasty perspective, like you said, I mean, these guys are coming in as rookies. They're young. At least you're, like you said, unless these teams bring in somebody else, I mean, they're guaranteed those, 3 to 4 years within those rookie contracts to be the guy. And that's kind of what brought me to put these guys higher in my rankings, just for that sheer fact.
For me, volume is king. So, you're you're speaking my language when it comes to that. I've come more to you as far as if someone is just that electric, you've got to acknowledge that because they can do more with less. But either way, I think you and I both see the value in workload, and it makes sense
Yeah.
for both
And
players.
not to mention, I mean, I think both of these running backs got the potential to break off some big plays on top of it too. So,
Oh, for sure. One guy I want to talk about in my tier, which could be very controversial on my end, I would imagine you're going to have him a lot higher, is Devon Achane. I would put him higher, but I got to tell you, I'm sure the tomatoes are going to come my way when it comes to this. I'm a little spooked by the Jalen Wright pick by the Dolphins. Jalen Wright is a speedster in his own right, and I've heard, no pun intended, and I've heard a few say that they believe that he may take the Raheem Mostert role in the offense, and then maybe Achane is the change of pace back that a guy like like Jeff Wilson and other guys like that have been before. And a part of me wonders, because so many people are so like enamored that they got to have Devon Achane. I'm almost starting to think, is Jalen Wright going to be the guy who steals the show? And he ends up being the one who gets more volume, more opportunity. You're still going to have Achane there, but Achane's had a lot of injury issues. He hasn't been able to stay on the field. I believe that Jalen Wright has a little bit more of a stockier build than Achane. So I don't know, Joe. I'm a little. I almost thought about even putting Wright in my top 24 because
wow.
I really wouldn't be surprised if there's a little bit of a swap that goes on here, and I could see Jalen Wright outpacing Achane at some point. Am I nuts? I mean, you can. I'll give you a first crack at it before others tell me I'm nuts.
I don't know if you're nuts, but I just think the tough part is with Achane. It's just like we talk about guys needing touches. He's not that type of guy. He's also, you mentioned his small stature. He's not a guy that can handle a full workload. But I think partly because of the injuries last year and the small spurts that we got to see out of him, I think that like what if factor that is there. Like, what if he's able to stay healthy and still create those big plays? It's almost like it's hard to get that out of your head, and everyone's getting enamored by it just because it's like we've seen how explosive this guy can be and the moves he can make, and just the potential's off the chart. And I think that's just hard to not consider. I mean, I left him where I had him ranked in our previous video. It was just hard for me to really move him off of not much really changing. And so if if it's Mostert, if it's Jalen Wright, I know other guys are going to be involved, but if this guy's just able to get some touches in space, he just needs a few touches, and man,
Oh
if
no,
he
I
makes those
get
big
it.
plays, like
I think he's one of the toughest people to rate
he
because
really is.
he does so much with so little. But I just feel like that's such a gamble. Like if you're trying to
Oh,
win,
it
like
is.
what if he's not used? Then you're out. You're out to lunch. Like nothing. Sorry. Like he didn't get his opportunities today. Wait till next week. I don't know. I just you want a guy that is going to be involved in the game plan. How involved will he be on a week to week basis? I don't know. I just think it's a risky proposition.
I think, on a week to week basis, I think he's going to be involved as long as he's healthy, and that's the question.
But you've got to hope he takes one to the house, or he has a huge burner I don't know. It's just how often is he going to do that? He's very talented. You would think that he could. I just feel like I just think it's risky.
Oh, there's no doubt. I mean, he's risky. He's probably like, I don't know. He might be the most risky running back we talk about on these rankings, honestly, just because like you said, just all these other guys, you could probably make a case for more volume than him, but we're talking about like sheer potential, and a lot of it we haven't even seen. We've just seen, like they said, those flashes of what could happen, and everyone's enamored by it. And I could have him too high. Who knows? I mean,
Briefly, I'll talk about I think the riskiest guy of the whole bunch is Kyren Williams. You and I both had him at
yeah,
10. I see people are like, oh, don't be, he's got a foot issue, not a big deal. For me, that road, I got a bunch of red flags that came up in my head. I mean, that was a part of the reason, if I'm not mistaken, why he missed a lot of his rookie year. Well, I think it was a Liz Frank, if I'm not mistaken, that he dealt with. I could be wrong about that, but regardless, he dealt with some type of foot ankle issue.
yeah,
They draft Blake Corum in the 3rd round. Blake Corum is no slouch. He's got great vision. I know you and I don't have him in the top 24. So it's like, to me, Corum is very interesting. I don't know. Kyren Williams, to me, I felt like I'd be an idiot if I didn't have him, decently high because of what he did last year. But I gotta tell you, he's a guy I'm not embracing him. I view him as kind of an avoid, in my opinion.
yeah. Kyren Williams was one of the tougher backs for me to place. I had him in tier 2 in our previous video. Knew I had to move him down from that. Question was for me, how far do I move him down? It was tough for me to move him further than 10. It seemed like a good landing spot. One thing that's got me questioning is just the fact that the Rams come out. I see the report. They said they want Corum to develop into that more of that 3-down back. I don't know what I think. Like, I think Corum already is potentially a 3-down back. I know we didn't see it a lot at Michigan, but he wasn't asked to do it. I think he's fully capable. So I was kind of confused why, they're saying they want him to develop into that. But
yeah, it's very interesting. I don't. So you and I are in the same boat on this one.
yeah.
I think those two though are definitely the toughest in my opinion.
Oh yeah, because I mean, I wanted to put Corum in here. I
I know you did.
I just don't know, like, who's gonna get the lion's share in that backfield, and it's tough because we've seen McVay lean towards one guy. Kyren Williams had such a great year being the guy. He had 70% of the overall touches in the backfield. So
He's another one. Again, people are gonna probably throw tomatoes at me, but it is what it is. I could see Corum outpacing Kyren. Same thing with Jalen Wright. I could see both of those rookies outpacing, these younger running backs. People are, like so excited about, Achane and Williams, and I think both could get outpaced by these guys.
yeah, we'll see. I mean, the Rams is going to be an interesting backfield to keep an eye on because I really do think like it's going to come down to whoever gets hot first between Kyren and Blake, and then whoever they're just going to ride the hot hand. I feel like that's what McVay likes to do.
I'll tell you this right now. Whether you do snake, and redraft or auction leagues, which is what we focus on, I'll tell you right now, their auction price, Corum and Wrights, I'll take theirs every day of the week than what I got to spend up to get Kyren Williams and Devon Achane.
Well, I'm curious to see what Corum's auction price is actually going to be because I mean, his ADP, see him falling into like the 3rd round, so curious to see like what his auction price actually would be. How high are people really on him?
Yeah, it'll be interesting. All right, so heading over to tier 2, Joe. Who do you got in tier 2?
Yep, and tier 2 at number 9, I've got Travis Etienne. At 8, I've got Devon Achane. 7, Saquon Barkley. 6, James Cook. And number 5, Jonathan Taylor.
Oh boy. All right. At number 9, I've got Josh Jacobs. 8, Rashad White. 7, Travis Etienne. 6, Saquon Barkley. And 5, Christian McCaffrey. So I'm going to talk about some players that you and I were really wide on. There's a big discrepancy. I got Josh Jacobs at 9. You had Josh Jacobs at 16. I didn't know what to do with Josh Jacobs. I obviously have been a believer in his in the past. He signed a 4-year deal with the Green Bay Packers. And we know that based on how the contract was set up, the Packers don't really give any guaranteed money past the first year. That's how they do business, which I don't know how players would want to work with them at that point because what leverage do you have? But that's beside the point. So Josh Jacobs it's basically a year-to-year proposition for him. So it could very well be that after this year, he's gone. But they did the same thing with Aaron Jones, and Aaron Jones stuck around for a very long time, and he did very well for them. So it's very possible that Josh Jacobs is able to thrive and succeed there. I don't love that Marshawn Lloyd is there. I think that Marshawn Lloyd, from what I understand, could be very similar to what Aaron Jones was to that offense. And if that is the case, I think it really hurts Josh Jacobs' value. But at the same time, you saw Aaron Jones in there, and they drafted A.J. Dillon, and we were expecting A.J. Dillon to do something, and he did nothing. They're not the same type of running back. I saw your face. They're not the, Quadzilla, that's really all he is quads.
Yeah.
That's all he really can, probably all he provided for the NFL. But, he was a bruiser type back, supposedly, didn't really do much. Lloyd is a much shiftier running back. So it'll be interesting to see how they're both deployed. I am, I guess, betting on the fact that because he has that long-term deal, and if he can be successful, that he can stay relevant for a number of years. And so because of that longevity, because it's not much in that position, that's why I had him at 9. But I'm assuming you had him at 16 because really it's a 1-year deal. Lloyd's going to compete with him for volume, and then who knows where he goes.
Yeah, really just that contract situation and just the unknown, scared me to put him higher. It has nothing like, I think, Josh Jacobs for this year went into a really good spot. I like him on the Green Bay Packers. Think he could get utilized well. But it's really just, is he still going to be on Green Bay, longer than this year? If you guaranteed me 2 or 3 years, I would have put him higher. But since we could just be going to year, not sure what's going to happen, I had a hard time, putting him higher.
And that's where I'm betting on him, is that
Right.
that's where he's going to be. That's my opinion as to what I think will happen to him. And so that's why I have him where I have him.
Yeah. Yeah, because, I like Josh Jacobs as a player.
I know he torched your Broncos.
Yeah, he was averaging pretty much 200 yards a game against the Broncos, just insane. But so don't have him at 16 because of the players, sheerly just because the situation and not really knowing what's going to happen beyond this year.
Another guy you and I are pretty distant on is James Cook. Yeah, you're a big believer in James Cook. You have him at 6, which I think is awfully high. I do not have him nearly as high as that. I have him at 13. I'll give you my reasoning. James Cook is an elusive running back, and he really came on the scene, and he did really well for the Bills. You saw with offensive coordinator Joe Brady, they heavily utilized the run game, and as a result, he became all the more better.
And now, who's still the offensive coordinator there?
Joe Brady's the offensive coordinator. You're correct about that. And Stephon Diggs is no longer there, so you could argue that they're going to, double down on that philosophy. But he has a fumbling issue that I don't think he has been able to resolve. And I think you're going to maybe think I'm nuts on this, but I give a little more credence to Ray Davis. Ray Davis is no slouch. I think that they didn't really have a second running back to really utilize. They tried to bring in Leonard Floyd. They used Ty Johnson. I think Ray Davis could be more heavily utilized, and he can receive too. So if James Cook is not being reliable, whether he's dropping passes or he's fumbling the ball, McDermott's a guy you saw, and I mean, he'll put you in the doghouse. I don't agree with it, but that's what he'll do. We've seen that before. That's just the type of football coach that he is. Not to mention Josh Allen is gonna, vulture some touchdowns because that's just who he is. So I think that's awfully high in my view. I personally, no offense to you, but I think it's nuts to have Cook ahead of Saquon Barkley, who I think is going to absolutely just go off in Philadelphia.
Oh yeah, I think Saquon Barkley's going to have a fine year, but
he's no James Cook.
James Cook's a lot younger as well and doesn't have all the injury problems that Saquon Barkley has had.
Okay, but we're talking 2 years of relevance with the Bills. After that contract's over, is he going to get a second contract? I'm not so sure.
Maybe not with the Bills, but I think he will somewhere. I think James Cook gets underappreciated. I feel like he went under the radar last year. nobody really realized how good he actually was. And if he stays on that pace with Joe Brady, I think the Bills are just going to run the ball a lot more this year. Um, that's what Joe Brady likes to do. That's how they keep Josh Allen out of trouble from throwing it to the other team. So, I really like James Cook, and he's more than just that big run guy that you're saying, just the elusive guy. And as long as the Bills give him the volume, which he started getting 15 plus carries towards the second half of the year last year, and he was really great.
No concern about Ray Davis.
Oh, Ray Davis is just simply the short yardage guy. Sean McDermott's old school. They want a guy that's, third and shorts to go ahead and pick that up and potentially in goal line situations, because for whatever reason, just because James Cook isn't that big, even though he's fast and can hit the hole fast and score touchdowns at the goal line, he prefers the big power back, and the Bills suffered many times for that.
Interesting.
Because they would rather pick in Latavius Murray, who was doing terrible at converting.
He was. Oh, you're not wrong. You're 100% right about that.
And James Cook might have converted, but they don't trust, the guy who could make a couple of moves at the line of scrimmage and get in because he's just too small. But I think that's really what Ray Davis is. I'm not really scared of him eating into the workload of James Cook.
All right, so head over to our last tier number 1. Who do you got there?
Well, at 4, I've got Christian McCaffrey. At 3, I've got Bijan Robinson. At number 2, I've got Jahmyr Gibbs. And at number 1, Breece Hall, baby.
Sickening. All right, at number 4, I've got Jonathan Taylor. 3, Breece Hall. 2, Jahmyr Gibbs. And 1, Bijan Robinson. So you and I are in the same ballpark here. I had McCaffrey in 5. You had Jonathan Taylor in 5. So we swapped those two. I think for me, I honestly, you might be shocked by this because I feel like I've been pretty critical of this guy in the past. I actually thought about putting Jonathan Taylor ahead of Breece Hall, believe it or not.
Really?
From 4 to 3. Well, because I just looked at it and he really has, again, maybe I get involved in this a lot, but he has no competition for workload at all. I mean, you're looking at Trey Sermon and I think it's Evan Hall. I mean, there is nobody going on with Jonathan Taylor. Now, you do have the Anthony Richardson factor, which is a real factor because he could be involved in the running game. They both were, we barely saw both of them on the field at the same time.
Right.
But now that Zach Moss is no longer there, and Taylor got a second contract, let's not forget, which is rare. So to me, I think there's a lot of things going well in Taylor's direction. Plus, he's young himself. So I like that. But obviously, you view him more as a tier 2 player.
Yeah, it was close for me. One thing, he just doesn't provide you the receiving value that some of these other guys provide. Now, he also gets a lot of rushing touches, but I'll be curious. Like you said, we barely got to see Anthony Richardson and him on the field at the same time. Anthony Richardson, I would assume, would eat into some of those touchdowns that he got with Gardner Minshew in there. So I'll be interesting to see how the two of them kind of work together. I like Jonathan Taylor, but obviously I like these other 4 guys better.
Now with Breece Lightning, you've got him in number 1 over there. I have always struggled with Breece Hall.
I know you have.
But I've given him more appreciation as time has went on. But what do you make of the Braylon Allen pick? I mean,
oh please, come on!
But listen to this, okay?
You're expecting me to be worried about Braylon Allen?
They brought in Dalvin Cook last offseason. They didn't use him at all, but what was the rationale behind it? They wanted to have somebody else to move as a change of pace back with him. For whatever reason, I'm not saying I necessarily agree with it. I think they should just give Breece Hall the rock. But time and time again, we've seen the Jets try to address that position, whether drafting Israel Abanikanda late, now drafting Braylon Allen, bringing in a guy like Dalvin Cook, having a guy like Michael Carter previously. Like, Breece Hall has been able to show that he's able to carry the workload, but then they keep bringing in different players. So I'm not saying that Braylon Allen is all that good either. I just wonder as far as the philosophy and the logic as to what are the Jets doing. And I don't know if I understand what they're doing.
Well, I mean, you got to have depth at the running back position. We say that these guys get hurt a lot, and you gotta have some depth there. And let's face it, they don't really have a bigger back in the roster. Behind them, they had Izzy Abanikanda, who is more similar to Breece Hall than he is.
He is similar,
that change of pace back, but that's bigger. I mean, if we're not worried about, I wasn't worried about like AJ Dillon with Aaron Jones. I ain't worried about Breece Hall and Braylon Allen. That's kind of, people are saying Braylon Allen could potentially be AJ Dillon. And you were talking about a guy that was descending in college, and compared to when he first started off, everyone was saying he was going to be the number one dynasty running back, and now Braylon Allen has completely fallen off.
You're not wrong, but I also wonder too, like is with Rodgers now, with Mike Williams and Malachi Corley and Garrett Wilson. I mean, Aaron Rodgers. I mean, for Breece Hall to continue, I mean, he was involved in the receiving game, but I feel like he's going to have to be all the more into it because they're not going to be as dependent on the run.
Yeah. I mean, Aaron Jones had fine years with Aaron Rodgers as his quarterback. Right. And let's face it, if Breece Hall can produce like he did with Zach Wilson or any of those other schmucks they had at quarterback last year after Aaron Rodgers, with defenses are just knowing they have one guy to stop, and that's number 20, and they couldn't do it. Now that they do have Rodgers and they've improved this offensive line, the sky's the limit for him this year, I feel like.
Here's the thing. I still have him in tier 1. I got him at 3. Oh, yeah. I just can't. I have to have Gibbs and Robinson ahead of them. I mean, they have 3 more years plus a 5th-year option, and by all accounts, both of those teams are going to accept the 5th-year option. Both players have been very dynamic. So you're talking about a relevancy of at least the next 4 years for these young running backs. To me, where Breece Hall, you got 2 years, and then do they sign him? Do they not sign him? A guy who has dealt with a lot of injury issues. So just from a contextual standpoint,
a lot of injury issues. Dude tore his ACL once, man. You're saying a lot of injury issues.
That's a big injury.
Right, but we see a lot of guys have it and they come back fine and play many years after.
Okay, I shouldn't say a lot of injury issues. He's had one significant injury, but regardless, right. I still think that to me, to Gibbs and Bijan, there's too much meat on the bone. There's too much potential down. I don't know if Breece Hall gets a second contract. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean that's fair, but for those 2 or 3 years that you're talking about, Breece Hall very well could just outscore those guys, and I'd bet on that.
Wow, interesting. So that does it for our top 24 Dynasty running back rankings with tiers. We also had a few rookies involved to make it all the more interesting as far as this top 24 as we prepare. Before we know it, Joe, training camp's going to be here in a blink of an eye, so it will be close. If you haven't had
a tweet, we got 14 or 15 more Sundays until football, which just seems crazy.
It does seem crazy. It's actually coming faster than you think. And if you haven't had a chance yet, go ahead and check out our previous episode. We talked about analyzing some salary cap fantasy football trades. If you haven't tried salary cap fantasy football, it's a lot of fun. We talked through some very interesting and complex trades. You want to check that out. Or if you're more interested in Dynasty ranks, we did quarterbacks. So that might be more your speed. Check that out as well. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time.